It's fast, it's fun, and it's even family friendly, making this one of the best mid-sized SUVs that you can buy for 2025. Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the refreshed 2025 Ford Explorer. But this one specifically is an ST trim level, so it's the performance variant of this mid-sized SUV by Ford, and it's in a color that they like to call Star White Metallic, which I must say in person it actually looks really good. There's a lot of metallic flake in the paint that you'll really notice on a slightly sunny day like today, but it's not perfect. So I need to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of this all new refreshed 3-row SUV to help you guys at home decide if it might be the right vehicle for you. So you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to the Goody Motor Group, specifically Goody Ford. They sell below MSRP. They ship all over the country. They're actually one of the funnest dealerships that I've ever had the honor of working with. So I'll link them below if you're interested in checking them out. And with that said, let's dive right into this review. And if you happen to be a fan of Ford, the Explorer ST or my video, please be so kind to consider liking my video. I really appreciate it. It helps me know that you want to watch more stuff like this. It also helps you by having YouTube choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you so much. If you're new to the Ford Explorer, there's actually a lot of stuff that you might want to know. First of all, that nameplate first came out in the first generation back in 1991. The first several generations were also a mid-sized SUV, but they were actually a body-on-frame very similar to the F-150s and the other SUVs at the time, and it wasn't until 2010 that the Explorer actually became a unibody platform. Just like in its body-on-frame days, the unibody shares a lot of platforms with other Ford and Lincoln models. This current 6th generation that started in 2020, it's on the same platform that the Lincoln Navigator rides on, but they're pretty popular. In the United States, they sell 150 to 250,000 units every single year. So this really outsells a lot of the other 3-row SUVs, especially the Japanese ones in our market. But they also are sold in Canada and Mexico, and they're all assembled in Chicago, at least for the North American or the United States market, I should say. So although vehicles cost a whole lot more than they did back in 1991, I do think Ford has done a decent job pricing the Explorer, at least the lower trim levels. I don't think they've really outpaced inflation. So for 2025, there's only 4 trim levels, starting with the Active. That one actually is about $40,000 before any extra options, destination delivery, charges like that. Or you can get the ST line, you can get the Platinum for a little bit over $52,000, or you can get this, the ST. These actually start at about $55,000, but the way this one is configured after destination delivery and a few extra options, it's about $61,000 or $62,000 before Goody Motor Ford gives you a big discount on it. So they're not cheap, but for 60 grand, what do you get? Well, you get these 21-inch wheels, you get a 400 horsepower twin turbo V6, you have a 4x4 or all-wheel drive system, you have leather seats that have Alcantara, you have a huge panoramic sunroof, you have roof rails, you have LED headlights, taillights, and everything in between. You actually have a lot of stuff, making this maybe a pretty decent value, but let me know what you guys think of that in the comments below. But for just a minute, we need to talk about ST and what Ford is doing with their ST division. Basically, what General Motors did about 20 years ago, and they were really cool, throwing SS badges on literally everything, from the HHR, to the Chevy Cobalt, to the Silverado, to the Trailblazer. Basically, every General Motors product, at least by Chevy, had an SS option, a big V8 or a bigger engine, a more powerful engine back in the day. They don't really do that anymore, but Ford does. Ford has an ST badge on basically all of their options, all of their platforms, and for the more off-road focused ones, they have vehicles with the Raptor nameplate. And the Raptors typically have the same engine as this, the 3-liter twin-turbo V6, but more on that later. I think a lot of you guys are probably not going to be buying the ST Explorer. You're going to be buying the 2.3-liter 4-cylinder EcoBoost, and that is actually a really good engine. There's a variant of that that's been around in the Mustang since 2015, and it's a very proven power plant. This one makes 100 more horsepower. It's 100 more horsepower of fun, but also it's not necessarily needed for day-to-day commuting and driving your family around unless you're specifically wanting a performance SUV like this. For being a 3-row SUV, it's actually on the smaller side, and yet it's still fairly tight in this parking space, as I'll show you around. I'm right on the line on one side, and I'll show you how much more room you have in front of it on the other side in just a second. But it's about 16.5 feet long, which is very similar to other vehicles like the Honda Pilot, like the Subaru Ascent. It's about 6.5 feet wide, roughly 5.8 feet tall, depending on which setup you have, the wheels, the tires, the engine, the 2-wheel drive or all-wheel drive system. It weighs about 4,300 to 4,800 pounds. This one specifically has a payload capacity of 1,160 pounds, which I would like to see a higher payload capacity, especially if you're going to have a third row seating option. But a lot of the suspension is more focused on sportiness and handling, and when you do that, you can't carry as much weight because of the dynamics of the suspension, and that's okay. Towing is 5,300 to 5,600 pounds to weigh, depending on how it's spec'd, and then it has 7.9 inches of ground clearance, a 358 final drive ratio, and it can do a full circle in about 37 feet. The last few things to mention here is the gas door is located on the driver's side, but even when I lock the vehicle, the gas door doesn't appear to be locking, so the bums might attempt to siphon some of your 20 gallons of fuel. It doesn't say you need premium, but I would imagine that a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 probably should be running off of premium fuel. So comment below if you own one of these and you know for sure. But it gets about 18 city, 25 highway, and just driving it around for the day, I actually haven't been able to get less than 18, and that's kind of having some fun with it. So this actually gets pretty decent MPG. This is your wheel. It's a Pirelli Scorpion Zero 275 45 21 with a red painted caliper back there and a pretty decent sized rotor. You don't have a full-size spare in the back, only a temporary. And then this is your key. You have unlock, you have lock, you have remote start, power liftgate, and panic button, but just leave it in your pocket because you should have proximity key features here. And when the vehicle's unlocked, the mirrors will open up. The driver's side door panel has a lot of black materials, but they're all very soft touch and they do feel a little bit higher end. You have kind of like a brushed aluminum and some other accents that are very similar around the B&O advertised speakers right there. You also have a lower speaker, you have a pretty good sized bottle and snack pocket, and then Ford Performance, which I love to see on the door sill. The all-weather mats are not yet installed. You also have rubberized dead pedal, brake, and an accelerator. You have the hood release, the OBD2 port if you decide to tune this thing up. And you have kind of a cool graphic right there on the side where some vehicles have a fuse box right there. This one doesn't necessarily say it, but actually mentions that the Explorer was started in 1991. Otherwise, you have lighting options, hatch release, B&O speaker, ventilation, more lighting stock options, and a really nice leather and suede centered seat with a panoramic moonroof up top. Sitting inside the Explorer ST is actually really nice, and if you're gonna pay 60 grand, it's basically what you'd expect. Everything is soft touch. I don't have any creaks or rattles or cracks or anything driving it around for the day, which is what you'd expect. It's basically a leather-wrapped steering wheel with red Ford Performance stitching. It has paddle shifters on the back for the 10R60 transmission that this has. The horn, it's loud, it's high-pitched, it's gonna do the job. You have ST down here. You also have all of your adaptive cruise settings up here, and your voice and volume is over here, but your volume adjustments here, voice and then controls for the center display are actually in the right side of the wheel. Visibility is really good because the dashboard is low, the hood slopes down, so you have really good forward-facing visibility. The side mirrors, they could be a little bit bigger in my opinion, but you actually can see quite a bit from there. You also have blind spot monitoring. The rear view mirror goes right through the center. And then the display right here, it's not the fastest, but it does have a lot of options and it's already been gone through, so that's why it seems to be responding earlier or quicker response times than it did earlier. But I don't like that all the climate controls are stuck in here. So if you want to get to heated seats, ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, anything like that, if you want to change the temperature, you have to be distracted by pushing little tiny buttons that are not really vibration, but there is a lot of audible noise. Otherwise, you have the vents all throughout the vehicle. You have your volume knob and you can turn off the radio with that. You have the extra options that this one has. The cameras, that is actually a really cool system. If it'll turn on, should turn on. Maybe we need to be starting the vehicle for that. The clarity is not fantastic, but because it takes up the whole screen and like when you're in reverse, the trajectory lines move, it's actually a super useful system and one of the best 360 cameras of any vehicle that I've recently been in. You also have wireless charging, extra storage, a hidden storage compartment down here, but I also have trouble getting it open. You also have a 12 volts and USB and C style, and then just a bunch of extra storage in that transmission tunnel. Otherwise, electronic parking brake, you can go through the drive modes right there. And you have quite a few, like a lot of these modern Fords. I personally like to leave it in sport right there. Otherwise, electronic parking brake. These again are your keys. I like that Ford actually went through the effort of putting the back plate with ST on them. And then you have more storage right there, a couple more USB style plugins, and a pretty deep center console storage that actually reaches down and forward just a little bit. Otherwise, up here you have a sunglass holder, you have your controls for the sunshade and the panoramic moonroof. And with that said, let's turn it off and we'll hop in the back. The second row is actually really nice, and like a lot of the 3-row SUVs, you actually have the extra sunshade beyond the factory tint, which is probably around 25%, I would speculate. Otherwise, B&O speaker as advertised by having the different faceplate. You also have those same textures, materials, everything is soft touch. You have a cup holder in the door, which is actually pretty common for 3-row SUVs. Storage down here, extra speaker, and then you have some rubber-lined steps, so if you need to get up to get into the back or up to the roof rails, you have those options. So sitting behind my driver position at 5'11", I actually have a few inches of room. You do have a bar down here that you can adjust pretty easily if you want to, but it's easy to find a nice position in this row. And then you have the armrests that are kind of like captain chairs down there. Otherwise, you have ventilation plug-ins, some storage down here, which is actually 2 baby-sized cup holders, and you even have 2 level heated seats with Explorer written in there, because when you're sitting back here, chances are you're going to explore something new. Anyways, let me hop out. I'm using the B pillar handle, and this is probably the easiest way to get into the back. The seat easily slides forward. And back here, this is probably the least favorite thing I ever do when I'm driving and reviewing vehicles. Not a ton of storage unless the person sitting in front of you has a lot less room than I allowed myself to use. So you could have enough storage back here. This is where Ford started to cheap out a little bit. This is your storage. This is your armrest. This is some cup holder. I guess that's the nicest thing back here. And a little bit more storage. A tie down for the back area, so it's not actually for you as the occupant. And then these very thin headrests that come up and can go back down. So overall, it's not too bad. And these probably recline like most of the 3-row SUV seats. But unless I'm doing something wrong, it doesn't really seem like it wants to go anywhere. So that's kind of interesting. I think overall, Ford did a really good job on the rear end of the Explorer. Even with the revision with these new taillights, it just looks aggressive and bold and very squared off, just like it has for a while now. But there's a few different ways that you can get in to access your cargo area. You can either push the button that's on the dashboard. You can climb over the seats in the 3rd row. You can push the secret button that's underneath the R on the Explorer emblem, or just use the remote. You paid for the power liftgate, you might as well use it. It opens reasonably quick, but it's pretty quiet. It also looks like it's powered probably on both sides, which I do appreciate. And then back here behind the 3rd row, you have about 18 cubic feet of room. And if we drop the seats, let's use the controls right there, you will then have about 46 cubic feet of room. And if you manually drop and lower and move forward, the 2nd row, you have 85 cubic feet. That again is very similar distance or cubic feet to what the Subaru Ascent, the Pilot, and most of the other 16.5 foot long 3-row SUVs have. This is a very similar platform, as a lot of the automakers are kind of matching what each other is producing. And then you might be wondering, where is the temporary spare tire? Because it's not under here, it's actually down here. There's some storage right here, but then there's a second tray that you can lower, and it actually has a pretty cool wheel design, which I'm digging. Otherwise, I'm gonna use the controls to lift the seats back up, and then you can lower or set your height adjustment right there, or you can lock and lower. In this case, we're just gonna lower it down, and it starts right away, and it does a pretty good job. Otherwise, if you get to come around to the front and ride in the shotgun seat, what do you get? Well, your door panel basically looks the same as the driver's side, minus a little bit of the switchgear, the controls right there that you would otherwise have. You still have Ford performance. You still have powered seats, and they are heated. They have all the options. They are very nice. My backpack is feeling good today. I do wish we had more storage on the transmission tunnel and above the glove box storage, but at least it's locking with the key hidden in your remote. And it's actually adequately sized, but I don't see any plugins or anything in here, so that's unfortunate. Otherwise, let's come around to the front. I'll pop the hood and I'll show you what the 3.0 liter V6 twin turbo engine looks like. To open the hood, you have to pull the lever twice by the footwell, and then you still have a prop rod for 60 grand. I really don't want to have a prop rod. I want to have some shocks on both sides. But overall, it is a pretty impressive 400 horse, 415 pound-feet of torque, and then you should be able to order a Ford Performance Tune for the 2025s pretty soon to up it about 50 horse, about 100 torque, and to run 0 to 60 times and quarter-mile times about a half second faster from what you're about to see in a few minutes. But overall, there's quite a bit of crumple zone, quite a bit of space, which is part of why this is overall a fairly safe vehicle in crash tests. You do have twin turbos, so you can see a turbo on each exhaust bank on each side. You have the computer over here. You have reservoirs scattered throughout. It looks like the battery is hidden under that plastic panel. And you might be wondering, is it going to be hard to work on this? It is pretty tight. That engine fits in there very nicely because, again, ST is all about stuff in a big engine, or a more powerful engine. Thankfully, these have been pretty reliable, but there isn't a ton of room to work on it without starting to pull away some of the piping and tubing, which there's a lot of when you have twin turbos. But it sounds good, pulls good, and let's take it on the road and have some fun with it. Initial driving impressions of the 2025 Ford Explorer ST. Let's get under some throttle. The torque from this little 3-liter twin-turbo V6, it really kicks in strong and at a really low RPM. Overall, it's a nice place to be. I feel like I'm sitting very similar to the F-150, where you feel like you have great visibility from anywhere that you look. If you notice, the dashboard is relatively low, the hood slopes down, the windows are big enough. The B-pillar, the C, you know, it does get pretty wide back there, but that's where those side mirrors come on. I do think Ford favored a little bit of form over function. They could be a little bit bigger if you ask for my opinion, but I can see well enough. You also have all the safety features on this loaded out $60,000 Ford Explorer. And when we take a corner at a little bit of speed, the weight shift from the suspension is nice. It feels really planted and stable on the road. Even at half pedal acceleration, it gets right up to speed. I'm really enjoying my time in this vehicle, and I've waited actually quite a long time for one of these, but when I heard that they were getting refreshed, I figured I would just wait for the 2025s instead of driving a 2024. And I'm glad I waited. There's not a ton of upgrades to the interior. A lot of it's the same, but the front fascia, it looks slightly different if you know what you're looking at. Same with the rear taillights. And overall, the backpack and I are having a marvelous time. The B&O speakers sound really good. I do wish the B&Os, just like the Sonys and the Bose and every other system on the market, was even better for the price you're paying. But at $60,000, you really are getting a lot of vehicle. There's a lot of fun that you're going to be having with this 3-row, 400 horsepower all-wheel drive SUV. And with that said, I really can't complain too much. I think you guys should test drive one of these for yourself. I think you're going to have a grand old time just like I am today. But overall, it does everything I want it to do. It feels really good. It feels like a competent SUV, and I'm not surprised why these sell up to about 250,000 units every single year. So with that said, let me get out to the private road. We'll do a 0 to 60, and then we'll wrap this up with my final thoughts. 0 to 60 in the Explorer ST. Keep in mind, density altitude is 6,200 feet. So even though this is twin turboed, it still is down on power, probably up to 10%. Let's see what it can do. True 0 to 60 came in at 5.79 seconds, or a little bit faster if you discredit rollout. This is a seriously quick, full-size or mid-sized SUV. My final thoughts of the 2025 Ford Explorer ST has actually exceeded my expectations. I don't know exactly what I was expecting. I've driven a lot of performance-based SUVs, but most of them have had a big 6-point-something-liter V8. I haven't driven as many turbocharged performance SUVs, and this one was actually really fun. It surprised me quite a bit. It pulls really hard. As you guys could see, even at 6,000 feet of density altitude, this thing still knocked out a 5.8 0 to 60 true time, or 5.5 something without rollout. That's just absurd. This thing hauls. It feels comfortable. It has a lot of creature comforts and safety features, and I think Ford did a really good job with this one. I think I'm okay with a base model Explorer starting around 40 grand, but I wish that the fun one, the ST, wasn't 50% more, a 50% or $20,000 premium over that, because I do think something like this would be really fun to own. But at 60 grand, you do start to compete against some non-American competitors. So my advice to you guys at home is to always test drive the competition. If you're gonna spend a lot of money on a vehicle, you might as well have some fun with it. Go test drive half a dozen or more cars. Test drive vehicles that you think you might kind of like, but you're not really sure on. You don't know until you drive them. You don't know how they're gonna feel to you. So that is my advice. And if you want something like this, if you want a huge discount, you want a road trip, or you wanna have it shipped to you, check out the Goody Motor Group, specifically Goody Motor Ford. They are seriously one of the funnest dealerships to work with. The guys there are great, and I can't recommend them enough. And if you got anything out of this video, please consider liking this video. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And with that said, I wish you guys the best. Hope to see you again, and until next time, take care.